I'm Spencer Ziegler.
Hi, I'm Mellisa Smith.
And I'm Serena Halstead. Welcome to our Data Lit podcast. In our most recent episode, What's the Data Telling Us? An interview with MTSS coaches, we mentioned that we're just about wrapping up this series, Talking Data. For the first half of the series, we focused on data-related concepts. Now we're in the last half. Our focus is on practical and meaningful use of data in our daily work. We have decided to talk with our very own Wake County Public School staff to get a better understanding of their interactions with school-related data and how they're using it to execute their duties within our school system. Today, we're pleased to have the opportunity to interview our very own Wake County Public School principals. Principal Robert Gupton from Phillips High School, Principal Michelle Bell from Forest Pines Elementary School, and Principal Aaron Marcin from East Millbrook Middle School, leaders in steering their data ship, so to speak, at their school. At this moment, I'm going to ask each principal to take turns to briefly introduce themselves, and then my co-host, Mellisa and Spencer, will be taking turns in asking them questions related to their data use in Wake County. So I'll begin with Principal Robbie.
Hi, I'm Robbie Gupton, principal at Mary Phillips High School. I have been in the Wake County system, I think, 29 years now. I have been at Phillips for 6 years and have loved every minute of it. It's been really nice to see as a district how we have evolved and gotten better at using data and developed more useful tools for leaders to make decisions. So I'm excited about the podcast.
Thank you. And Principal Michelle, what about you?
I am Michelle Bell. This is my 26th year in education. I was a middle school teacher. I'm an AP. And now I currently lead Forest Pines Elementary, where we are immersed in data. And as we speak, our teams are actually looking at data today and over the next couple of days. So we are definitely immersed in data at our school.
Thank you. And Principal Aaron.
My name is Aaron Marcin. I'm the lead learner and principal at East Millbrook Magnet Middle School. I have been here for 3 years. We serve a Title I Restart middle school environment. And so as we work to grow every student each day, we use a multitude of data because one type of data is never enough and it doesn't tell us that full picture of the students who we serve. And then prior to coming to East Millbrook, I led an elementary school, also in Wake County, but not nearly as many years as my colleagues.
Thank you so much. Now, Principal Aaron, I'm not picking on you, but you said you're the lead learner, and I like that. And with that being said, I'm going to start with the leader. So my first question, when we talk about data, we often speak about demographic, perception, process, and student learning data. What role do these different types of data play in your work?
If we're tasked with measuring the level of learning that's taking place in each classroom. And so in order for us to measure that, we have to first make sure that students feel safe and comfortable in those classrooms. And so we get student perception data. And so at the middle school environment, 8th graders take that assessment. And then at the school level, we have created one for each classroom. So students take an in-house climate survey, and they do that twice a year. So each teacher gets real data based on the students who they serve. So if you're a 7th grade math teacher, you get the climate data from the 7th grade math students who you serve. And then that helps each PLT analyze data compared to a team, compared to a department, and then grade level in a school. So we're able to look at, are we starting with that environment where kids feel safe and comfortable in order for learning to take place? And when it is happening, then that gives us a place to go look and see, well, what's happening in those environments where students are safe, happy, and excited to learn. And then it also gives us a little direction if we need to make some changes in other environments as well.
Thank you. You mentioned here perception data, and I can recall the only time I'd seen that perception data, the actual result of what the students said, was when I got here in Wake County, the central office. But other than that, I was not aware that students were spilling the beans on us as teachers. And it would have been good if I knew how my students felt towards even being in my class and being in the school. Well, thank you so much for that. Principal Bell, what about you?
So I think we often forget a key part of data is the students. And so it is important to make sure that their voices are being heard because we leave them out so many times. And so we can think as the adults, as the teachers, that we have this perfect environment. But if our kids feel like they can't learn in that environment, then we need to know that, because I like to think of it as ground zero. So teachers are ground zero, but the kid is the one that's receiving that. So if they're not feeling welcomed, or if something's happening with another student, if we don't have the data to know that, then we can think academically that this classroom is thriving because the numbers say so. But it might be that there are kids within the classroom, and if it's every kid every day, then we have to look at all aspects of what the data is saying.
Thank you. And what about you, Principal Robbie?
I would piggyback on what has been said so far. How can we be student-centered if we don't ask for the students' perceptions? So one of the things that we do here at Phillips is we also we have an internal student survey that we do twice a year at the end of each semester. And we even go so far as to make that data-driven conversation in teachers' mid-year PDP conferences around their students' survey results. So they're getting feedback on their classes. And it's always interesting because, we all, even when students are hitting credits at a high rate and things like that, because in high school, the rules change, right? It's about earning credits and not about promotion or retention. And it's not always about growth, but about getting credits towards graduation. And we usually do see a correlation between those classes where students are the most successful and the perceptions of the students in those same classes. The classes that the kids feel like they're being listened to, classes where they feel safe, classes where they feel like the teacher is responsive to their needs, also tend to be the classes where students hit their credits at the highest rate.
I hear that each of you spoke to the role of perception data, especially from your students. I'm curious about process data. So like any walk around tools or, the way you do business. Do any of you have examples of how you use that type of data at your school?
So I'll start. This year, we started with walk-arounds in our school improvement team. Each member has a number of walkthroughs that they have to do. And so we started simple with just looking at the environment. So we were looking at things like what's up on the wall. Is it culturally responsive? Mm-hmm. Is it welcoming for kids? Do kids that are represented in the classroom see representations of themselves? We took that data back and we said, okay, here is an area, maybe this teacher needs support, or on this grade level, we don't see a lot of culturally responsive representations in the classroom, or on this grade level, oh my goodness, this grade level is knocking it out of the box. How can we replicate this throughout the building? So each quarter, we've been focusing on a different strand, and then we're coming back and talking about it as a school improvement team. And it all goes back to our school improvement plan. So we made sure that it was very strategic. It's not just random what we're looking for.
Well, thanks for sharing.
And I love hearing about the interplay about the different data types, how the process data and the perception data can inform some of those other areas. It's written that Susan Bernhardt writes about how many educators believe that over 50% of student achievement results can be explained by other factors. And y'all are doing such a great job at looking at those other factors and how they influence what happens in the classroom. So that's wonderful. We're also, we're blessed to have so much experience as administrators here on this call. And we're curious, just how has your relationship with data changed as a leader?
As you develop as a leader, you obviously understand the importance of following the data and utilizing data to make decisions. I think over time, I've come to appreciate the importance of making sure we understand the limitations of the data.
Oh, I like that.
In other words, we can spend a lot of time talking about EVOS and growth, and that's a wonderful, wonderful tool. That growth is always couched within the context of how you did compared to all the other schools in your state.
Right.
And I think that's an important thing. And that even gets into teacher retention and teacher support, that we not beat teachers over the head with some of this data when it has such limitations, and that we point those things out, because it's not Lake Wobegon. Everybody can't be above average, right?
Right.
And so I think over time, that's one of the things that I have learned to always acknowledge. It's important for teachers to hear that and to hear that acknowledgement from a leader. I think it makes them feel safe to engage in conversations about data.
I like that. And something that y'all have said is just the data being used to have conversations. And I think you can get into some of those gray areas and figure out just precisely what the data is and is not telling us when you're having conversations around it, instead of just edicts around it. Principal Michelle, what about you? How has your relationship with data changed as a leader?
So it's interesting because I kind of equate it to when I started as a math teacher. So I was a math teacher and I got math. And so I'm teaching math to my students, but I'm teaching from, because I got it, but it didn't mean that my kids understood what I was teaching. I knew it in my head. And so I translate that to a principal. I love data. So I'm always looking at data sources. And what I had to recognize is not everybody loves numbers. Not everybody loves math. And so just because I love the data and I can talk the data, I want to be sure that, one, my teachers aren't intimidated by the data, that the data doesn't beat them down. Like this morning, I started our conversation with, this is a set of data, right? It doesn't mean that if our data is not looking the way that we want it to look, that you are a bad teacher. That's not what it means. It is going to inform our instruction. So for me as a leader, making sure that I can translate the data into, this is a us, this is a we, not this is a you, and this is something that you're doing wrong. How can we modify our practices to change these outcomes?
I love how conscious you are about how it's not just what we know, what we say, but how it's received and the impact. It's wonderful. And what about you, Aaron?
I would say I've grown up in Wake County, so that's kind of been, I remember being a classroom teacher and going to the DeFore conference in Durham, where we learned about commonly informative assessments, and we make all these charts. And then I moved and I completed my internship, and then I became an assistant principal. And I think my growth happened probably when I moved into that principal role, because it always was like we would use data as an end point. And to be quite honest with you, I think during those times, everything that we had to progress monitor was teacher created. We were using a tool that was designed by people who were not assessment makers. And so we were almost swaying our own data as we went, because we were making biased assessments and then using the biased assessment to drive future instruction. I mean, it was a disaster. And so I think when I moved into the principal role, you start to see, and I think Robbie mentioned earlier, or maybe it was Michelle, we used to always talk about subgroups. Well, when you start to look at that, you realize we are responsible for that gap. Like that's our fault. And maybe not because of our instruction, but maybe because of the assessment. And so I remember a few years back as an elementary leader looking at math. And I'm like, we don't really have a way to progress monitor math. Like there's not a tool that was not teacher created. And so our special ed department, Crystal Cabral, was like, hey, we're testing this thing called Dreambox. Give it a shot. And so we were the first school to implement and use Dreambox school-wide. And when we used that as a way to progress monitor, not to measure, did a student do what they were supposed to do, or did a teacher teach what they were supposed to teach, but are we making growth and progress with what we are actually teaching? So are we measuring the instruction? Not are we measuring the standard? And when we started to do that, then we saw EVOS data turn blue school-wide. We saw percent proficient as a school move from 45% to 78% those were the outcomes of measuring our instruction instead of measuring the standard. So I think just over time, I have grown to realize what my limitations are. Like I might be a leader of people, and our teachers, they're great at teaching kids and building relationships, but they're not so great at creating assessments. And so finding the sources that are out there, like, okay, well, we're going to play on our gifts and talents and use what someone else's gift and talent is to guide our future work.
Hey, I love how each of you have kind of touched on your relationship with data, leading you to a spot where you can tap into that every child each day mindset. I think that's wonderful.
To notice that each of you sort of touched on data sometimes can have a sense of an impersonal kind of cold look, but each of you in your description and your stories of what is happening at your school building seem to really understand the personal or relationship aspect of data. And so my next question is about what elements or characteristics are needed to foster a positive data culture? Michelle, let me start with you.
So I think with this one, people fear data. And I think we fear data because of what the data says and the impact it has on us personally. So again, I go back to our data meeting today. We started with celebrations. We don't want to talk anything negative, right? It is, what is it that we can celebrate out of this data? Because so many times you see in M class, for example, this kid is red. But what about the growth that this kid made? And so when you really start to dig into it, I think one of the biggest things is not looking at data on a surface level, but digging deep. Because when you dig deep, you can get a better understanding of what it is the data is saying. Therefore, I think you can change some mindsets because, oh, okay, I did good as a teacher, because it's going to come back to the I. I did good as a teacher on letter naming. Oh, okay, well, this is an area right here where this kid might need to improve. So it's taking that fear, celebrating where you can celebrate, and owning it as a school, not having a person own it individually, but what is it that we can do together to shift this color, shift this growth, shift this understanding? Because at the end of the day, when we change our mindset, the kids are the ones that are going to benefit.
I like that. Aaron, what about you? So I think in our group, you had the least years of principalship. And so what have you learned as a fairly new principal? What does it take to build that positive data culture?
There's that difference, I think, that elementary teacher, the way they see data and versus a middle school teacher. So there is a difference just because the culture of those two types of environments are different. One of the ways that we have done it, and I go back to, I think, what I probably learned in DU4 was when we first analyze data, we take names off of it. Mm-hmm. Because then no one knows what they're looking at. I know. And so then what I can do within that data set is share the things that I know. Because when someone sees their name or their grade level or whatever it is, they're not actually analyzing the data. They're coming up with a response. And so by removing that first, they actually give you honest feedback, especially if they think it's another school. So if I'd be like, hey, y'all, look at this data from Phillips. Mm-hmm. What can you tell me is going on over there? Mm-hmm. They give you all the tea right there. But then when you're like, all right, it actually came from here. Right. And then they're like, oh, it has made it safe when they don't feel it's personalized. And then I think the other thing is we write intentional questions ahead of time.
Oh, I like that.
And so they're not random. They're not just willy-nilly questions.
Yeah.
I think the real purpose of data is to influence change. Mm-hmm. And so if that's what we're doing with it, then you have to be aware, conscious, and intentional about the questions you ask. Because you have to know where you're wanting to shift something. Yeah. And if you're going to use the data to actually make a shift and a change, then you have to know the right question to ask.
I like that. All right, Robbie, what is happening at the high school level?
Well, I think we've heard some elements of this in the previous two responses. First is trying to come up with ways to build safety.
Yeah.
So that, especially when you're asking teachers to reflect on data, that they don't see it as evaluative, that they feel safe to reflect and as Michelle said, also see the good and the bad, right? So celebrations are important. The other thing that I've noticed at the high school level, and I think Aaron would probably agree, especially when it comes to formative data, our resources get less and less as the grade level goes up, right? And so by the time you get to high school, there's very little in terms of strong formative assessment. And so almost all of our data is looking backwards and not looking forwards. And that's something that I think would be a good challenge moving forward. I think most high school principals will tell you our progress monitoring at the high school level is looking at grades. Mm-hmm. There's not a lot of formative assessment going on throughout the instruction of a semester. So that would be another sort of characteristic that I would say that could be something to foster a positive data-driven climate, is to have good quality formative tools so that teachers get some sense of control of, this is how we can change this. And it's not always just looking backwards.
So far we've talked a lot about communicating data with teachers, but one of the fascinating things about your position is that you respond to so many stakeholders. So we are curious, is how do you engage all stakeholders? Yes, teachers, also students and parents and community members and so on. How do you engage all stakeholders in your school's data conversations?
So at the end of the year, we try to do it at the end of the year. We'll do it the first week in August. We have a data retreat where we kind of pull out all of the data, look at the data from the previous year, and kind of start to triangulate some of that data. We include, it's very important to me and for us to have a parent on that. And so it's really interesting when you have a parent sit in those meetings, because sometimes people are going to be like, oh, well, I don't know if we should have the parent here. Well, why shouldn't we? Right? Because I think a parent can bring a perspective that we don't sometimes see because we're in it. So when you're in it, sometimes you already have crafted answers that you don't even realize that are already crafted. Well, this data looks like this because, this data looks like this because. A parent can trigger a whole question that you never even thought about. Have you considered doing this? What if you do this? So including a parent is very, very important. We have a parent that is a part of our school improvement team, as everyone should have, but they are an important part of that because sometimes you have teams where parents will just sit. We encourage our parents to partake and to be a part of, to give that feedback. Like, for example, we are getting ready to deploy a family engagement survey for our families. And then we're going to come back and with the parent on that team, we're going to discuss that information. So making sure we have that, because again, we're looking at it from inside. We need that outside view as well.
That's perfectly put, the inside and outside. I like that. Aaron, what about for you?
Well, I think one way was community partnerships are important when you're leading a school community. So in the past, we've leaned out, like with the YMCA, when we partner with them and we want to show, all right, this is the work that you're investing into our school. So here's some outcomes that are positive that we want to share with you around that same work. Michelle brought up a great point about the parent communication, and how some schools have a great avenue through like a family community engagement. So as a Title I school, we have that. And so what we're able to do is ask parents and families through that venue and through that team, what is it you'd like to know? What can we do better and share with you? And so I think that has been something we're getting information on, because what they want to know is what these assessments look like. And depending on where your school is located, and depending on, like, I have 2 kids in Wake County Public Schools. My kindergartner can tell me everything about his day and what happens in that school. My 3rd grader I don't even know that he knows the kids' names in his class. Like, he won't talk to me. So, for an example, he did not even finish the COGAT test. And so we're sitting at the table and my husband's like, should I be upset about this? And I'm like, no, like, it's fine. Like, he didn't finish it. We asked our son, like, Daniel, why didn't you finish it? He goes, Dad, that was a bunch of nonsense. And I was like, and it is. So if you know the test,
Right.
then I'm able to respond to him well, because I'm like, actually, it was nonsense words and they want you to, make sense and draw conclusions on the nonsense words. But like, another family would have been like, oh God, we have a real problem with our kid.
Right.
So that experience has, I think, shifted my approach to data with families here. So we do a Sunday message. We're about to start our ELL testing, access testing. We try to inform parents of what we're doing, what it looks like, and what the purpose is. So they might not be able to like help my kids study for this, but there's an awareness that these things happen and they take place. And when I get the results, what am I supposed to do with it? Because that, you all could do a great job of sending us those packets that say, send these home to your students' families. And we have adapted now. Like, what I was sitting here and the lady came over, our lead secretary, she was like, print shop delivery came, because we write letters that explain those to parents and families. And then we have to do that in English and Spanish. So then that way, when they get the form, they have an understanding of, oh, this is FYI, I don't have to do anything. This is FYI, and I should be concerned and I should do something. Or this is FYI, and I need to take my kid out for some ice cream, something. So I think that has been, we could do more and we could do better. But the pandemic has got me tired, friends.
That's fair. That's understandable. I love that approach of trying to figure out how to translate it based on the needs of those stakeholders. All right, Robbie, what about you? How are you connecting with all your stakeholders?
Well, I think it's a lot easier with teachers and students than it is with family and community. And some of that may be the uniqueness of my school, in that my community is all of Wake County, right? I've got kids in Wake Forest. I've got kids in Fuquay. I've got kids I don't have you can't draw any circles around my school. And right. So for the families, I think the communication piece is magnified, right? Like that, the importance of that is magnified, in that we just have to constantly utilize the tools that we have to make sure families understand our data and understand what we're doing with our students. Talking Points has been a wonderful resource for us. I use that all the time, and it really has helped us reach families and engage them more than we would by just sending out a phone call. With the staff and the students, there are so many things built into our school improvement plan that sort of ensures engagement, right? In terms of, what does the data say? How are we doing our quarterly reviews? Those processes kind of build in engagement with the staff and the students. The families are where the challenge is for us.
Thank you so much, Principal Robbie. And I'm just, reflecting on what Michelle mentioned about her data retreat. I remember, sitting in data retreat, and we never had asked a parent to sit in and join us. And so that is really powerful, to think that the parents could sit in and look at our data, our overall school data at the end of the year. And let's talk about this, because at the end of the day, who are we serving? The parents, right? We're serving their student. And, Principal Aaron, you touched on something very important, which I really like. You mentioned something about Sunday messages. And it was the first I was experiencing this. My son is in elementary. And so his principal, they do have a Sunday, she calls it Sunday scoop. So just the word scoop, I'm like, okay, I'm going to be hearing something really good. But it's about telling us what's going on after school and who you can contact for further information. So I really, really like that. Principal Robbie, you mentioned the community. It's easier, yes, to engage our teachers, but, reaching out there to the wider group, which is the entire Wake County, the community, the families. It's a bigger picture than what's going on inside the school. So when we think of engagement, really considering what the teachers need, what our students need, what our parents need, and other community members, trying to get them involved. That's really good.
So I feel as though in Wake, we have massive, like more data than, I don't know, maybe the feds even. And so I hate to ask this question, but apart from like the commonly used types of data, and Aaron, you mentioned this a little bit, are there additional data you wish you had? And if so, why?
I will say this. We have created found what we needed. We have a data tracking sheet for every single grade level. It would boggle some other people's minds, but it drives my everyday purpose, because I know that every kid is receiving instruction, and so every kid should be making growth. And if we can assign focus in Dreambox, it's measuring their daily progress. And then we can report that to the students, and we can report that to the families. Another thing is, like, we just worked with the whole Dreambox company, and we were like, look, due to pandemic and loss of learning, and we had to reset every single student in our school. The students in 8th grade were trying to do 8th grade, and they're not. Like, they missed a year and a half of instruction. That is not their fault, because a teacher doing 30 minutes in a virtual, they didn't get the same learning. So we weren't getting good data out of Dreambox because the kids were frustrated as I stopped doing it. So we just bumped everybody back, and then students on a tiered plan, instead of moving them back 2 grade levels, we moved them back 3 to 4 based on what we knew about them. And now we just finished this up, and now everyone's back on track, because the purpose is that some of these assessment, those tools for progress monitoring should be at their learning level, not their assigned grade level. Mm-hmm. And every kid is at a different learning level. It doesn't matter what grade they're assigned to, especially like Robbie said, when they get to in secondary, you get to the end of the year and you're like, am I going to retain this 14-year-old?
Right.
But if I know what that 14-year-old needs to learn, like what are the gaps in their learning, that I can help them get the core and fill in the gaps at the same time with core plus more, that's where we're going to make that growth and progress for every student each day.
So it sounds like you see the value in the progress monitoring data, and you've incorporated that really well into your culture of monitoring every kid all the time. Robbie, what about you? Is there, I hate to ask, is there additional data that you feel that you need?
I think that would be the additional data that I think all high schools would like to have, is progress monitoring data that is made for high schools. It's just not out there, and it by default becomes our kids hitting their mark on awarding credits so that they graduate on cohort, and you know the most important piece of data that they're monitoring then is the graduation cohort rate. But in terms of a commonly used progress monitoring tool at the high school level, that's where we're lacking.
All right. Well, Michelle, I know you're not lacking in this area because progress monitoring is all elementary.
So, I'm not going to say that we are lacking in data. What I'm going to say is that we need the time to immerse ourselves in the data. For example, in-class data, right? We're looking at the in-class data right now. So, one, there are no subs. So to be able to do a day of planning for teachers, a half day of planning, to look at that data, to synthesize that data, to process that data. So within half a day, I'm asking teachers, I need you to look at your data. I need you to process your data. We got to make groups. We got to do this. We just need some time to dig in and really, and our teachers do a phenomenal job of doing the work at looking at data. So time, not because we get a lot of data in elementary, it's a lot, but the time to really process it all, I think that's a better way to say it.
We used to have, when you look at a schedule, you'll see, in the days, a pacing guide, they'll have the days for the instruction. They might have a day or two for assessments, but we never really had a day just for data before we started all over again. So that would be really a world where that is a part of it would be so ideal.
On that note, Principal Robbie and Michelle, Aaron, if you had one sentence that you would like to share with other school leaders about the use of data, what would that be? And I'm going to start with you, Robbie.
One sentence. I think I don't know that I can do this in one sentence. You're all going to have to edit this. I've never.
You throw semicolons in between, so it's
Yes.
it's like a William Faulkner sentence.
One long run-on sentence.
I think that going back to a previous point earlier, is understanding limitations of an individual set of data is important to build safety for teachers. Also, understanding that almost every initiative or tool that we create, at the end of the day, it lands on the plate of a teacher.
Thank you. And what about you, Michelle? What is it that you would like other leaders and persons listening to understand about educational data use?
I think it's when you are looking at data, don't forget there's a child attached to this data. See the face, see the kid, and know that this is a number, but we don't have to make that who this kid is. We have to see kids for more than just a data point, for multiple data points, and that we can change a child's future by what we do with that data.
Thank you. And Aaron.
I appreciate you letting me go last so I could write my. I wrote, every school is unique and different. Watch, learn, observe, and then use the data that's available to you with purpose to help move the school that you serve where it needs to be to best meet the needs of every child each day.
I love that.
You can just edit my part out and put that right there.
I like that. Definitely.
Maybe if you could play his audio while my mouth is moving.
And so thank you, Principal Robbie, Michelle, and Aaron for joining us today in sharing some practical use of data in our work at Wake County Public Schools. We also like to thank Cary High School student Logan Foster for theme music. And as always, if you have any questions or you want to leave us a comment, you can send us a message at www.wcpss.net/datalit. Goodbye.
Take care.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.